I'm Jennifer Pulley. Welcome to NASA 360. Okay, right off the top, I got a quick question for you. Where does NASA launch most of its space missions? Well, for those of you that don't know, let me give you a hint. If I said launch at the Cape, would you know what then? Yep, it's Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center. The Kennedy Space Center has been the launching point for virtually every NASA mission since, well, the beginning of NASA. This place is amazing, and today you're in for a special treat because NASA 360 is going behind the scenes to take a closer look at some of the amazing facilities here at Kennedy. And we'll also meet some of the people down here on the Space Coast of Florida who make those launches possible. Here's Johnny Alonso to get the show rolling.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Johnny Alonso. Today I'm at one of the most recognizable places in the world, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This is where all the most important American missions have been launched. Dig it, missions like Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Skylab, and all the shuttle flights, and not to mention hundreds of other important scientific flights too. This will also be the place where NASA's new Ares rocket will blast off into space when we go back to the moon. So this is the place to be if you want to know how NASA gets these huge rockets into space.
Main engine ignition. 3, 2, 1.
So what does it take to get a vehicle in space? Well, it's not very easy. Thousands of people must perform extraordinary jobs every day just to get a vehicle ready for launch. And I'm not talking about all the planning and engineering it takes to build a spacecraft. No, I'm talking about just getting it ready to fly, putting it in launch position and blasting off into space. But before we start our tour, let's take a few minutes and talk about some of the important historical events that have happened here at Kennedy.
It wasn't until near the end of World War II when the U.S. really started getting interested in rocket flight. The main reason was because the Germans were using a rocket called the V-2 as a weapon against us. Even though this was a terrible weapon, American planners saw the potential this rocket could have militarily, and as a forerunner to large rockets that could help us explore space. So after the war, the military brought about 100 captured V-2 rockets back to the States and began testing them in New Mexico. It wasn't long before researchers realized that they needed a place to test longer-range rockets. So in 1949, President Harry Truman established the Joint Long-Range Proving Ground at Cape Canaveral. The Cape was the perfect place for this type of testing because its location was so remote that nearby communities would not be in danger, and of course the weather permitted year-round testing. Okay, fast forward a few years. It's now 1957, and the Navy was testing the Vanguard rocket to send the first satellite in space. They had sent up 2 of these rockets on suborbital test flights, but we're all in for a big shock on October 4, 1957, when the Russians beat us to the punch, launching Sputnik, the first man-made satellite into space. The race for space was now on, and soon the name Cape Canaveral would be one of the most well-known places on Earth.
Soon after Sputnik was launched, NASA selected the first astronauts to participate in our manned spaceflight efforts, Project Mercury. And one of the main goals was to learn as much as possible about space to help us to get ready to go to the moon.
On May 5, 1961, Alan Shepard became the first American in space with the launch of the first Mercury flight called Freedom 7. Although his flight was suborbital and only took about 15 minutes, the U.S. had done it. We had put an American into space for the first time. In that same year, President Kennedy told the world that the U.S. would be striving to put humans on the moon and bring them back safely by the end of the 1960s. So with this new deadline, training and flights began getting fast and furious. After the Mercury missions were complete, Project Gemini was launched. Astronauts gained valuable information on docking in space while also performing the first American spacewalk. But with the last Gemini flight in 1966, all eyes turned to Apollo, and the moon was our next target.
It's amazing, isn't it? In just under 10 years, we went from barely understanding how to get humans off this Earth to preparing to send them to the moon.
So on July 20th, 1969, the nation's goal of putting humans on the moon was realized when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed at the Sea of Tranquility on the moon.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
This flight was followed with 6 other Apollo flights, with Apollo 17 becoming the last flight to the moon. NASA quickly closed the book on the moon missions, focusing their talents and technology on a new craft called the Space Shuttle.
Now, many of you watching this have never known a time when humans weren't flying in space. A lot of us take that for granted. But let me tell you something, it's not easy to prepare everything you gotta do to get up to space. All right, so are you ready to go on a tour? Let's roll and check out some of the facilities here at Kennedy and meet some of the hardworking people that are making these spacecraft fly.
The VAB is where the space shuttle gets assembled for spaceflight. This is how it works. First, the solid rocket boosters are mated together and attached to the giant external fuel tank. Then the orbiter gets towed and raised to a vertical position with overhead cranes. It's attached to the other components and is ready to go. Well, almost ready to go.
So how to get the orbiter out of this building and onto the launch pad? Well, with one of the baddest moving trucks you've ever seen. Around here, they just call it the crawler. Tell me about the crawler.
Well, Johnny, the crawler was built about 1965, and it was basically the main transport to take the Apollo vehicle from the vehicle assembly building out to the pad.
This thing is huge.
It's 130 feet long, about 115 feet wide.
And what's max weight on this thing?
Well, let's see, the crawler, it's about 6.5 million pounds. Pretty heavy. So it stays on the ground, no problem, you know? But the crawler carries, right now it's carrying about 13 million pounds.
13 million pounds.
Yeah, so you got a total weight of crawler and vehicle of about 18 million some pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Rolling down the road.
I'm going to assume this thing doesn't go very fast.
It's not real super fast. We like to keep it probably around 1 mile an hour. Now its design speed when it was first designed was almost a speed of 2. But actually it is fast when you're on the crawler. I mean, because of the mass that it's moving.
So you fill a tank up. I'm just going to ask you, if you fill up the tank, I mean, you know, what can you get per gallon?
Well, it's about 38 feet per gallon.
38 feet per gallon.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we actually have 2 tanks on the crawler. Each are 2,500 gallons apiece.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it'll last a couple of operations.
Tell me, what does the crawler do?
Well, the crawler, the basic task of the crawler is to pick up the mobile launch platform. The mobile launch platform, of course, has the vehicle stack on it.
Sure.
And it moves it from the assembly building and it moves it out to the pad.
Okay.
And then sets it down and then moves back away from it. And then once the vehicle launches, it goes and picks up that mobile launch platform and brings it back to the vehicle assembly building for another stack.
Is there only one crawler?
No, there's actually 2.
Are there?
Yeah, NASA had 2 of them built back for the Apollo program.
All right, so we know what kind of mileage this huge thing gets. How's it powered?
Well, you know, funny she'd ask that. Why don't we just go up here and we'll check it out?
Let's go.
Yeah, walk back into history.
Oh, look at this.
These engines here, those are the same engines that have been on here since '65.
Since 1965.
This is what powers the crawler here. There's actually 2 of these. There's one here,
Okay.
one on the other side.
Okay.
And each one of these powers 2 1,000 kilowatt DC generators.
Really?
Kind of works like a diesel electric locomotive.
Sure. Let me ask you, so how do you move this thing? How do you drive it?
Well, come on, I'll show you.
Sure.
We'll walk right up here. Okay, Johnny, come on. Let's come in this cab right here.
Okay. Oh, cool.
This is the operator's cab.
Wait a minute, wait. That's the steering wheel?
Yeah, it's not your typical steering wheel.
For such a big ring, my God.
For probably one of the largest vehicles, this is quite a small steering wheel. The steering itself is, of course, it's all electronic.
Yes.
And what's happening with this wheel is when you're turning it, it's sending a signal back to what we call our PLC, which is Programmable Logic Controller.
Okay.
And it takes that signal, sends another one out to some hydraulic pumps that in turn move these large cylinders out here. And
Cool.
the cylinders themselves move the trucks back and forth.
Sure.
And of course it steers itself down the crawlerway as to, you know, depending on what kind of degree you put in.
Is that how you control the speed?
Exactly. This is just like a foot pedal, you know, a speed pedal in the car. What you're doing here is you just increase this pot control, and it takes those. When we looked at those generators back there, it excites those fields.
Yes.
And by exciting those fields, we can adjust the speed of these propel motors down.
Huh.
And then along with the gas pedal, you know, you got a transmission. It's just like a car, forward, neutral, reverse. The other thing that the crawler operators are always worried about is its height, because one of the basic operations of the crawler is moving the mobile launch platform out to a set of columns, setting those down and moving out from under it. So he's always aware of what his height is, and he does it here by this average height meter.
It's been a pleasure. It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much for bringing us around today.
We enjoyed it, Johnny. We're glad to have people come out and take a look at our machine.
Definitely. This was a lot of fun. You're watching NASA 360. We'll be right back.